Hello guys, today we're going to talk about the movie Coward of the County. This movie was released in 1981. It's not rated. It's an hour 35 minutes long. It has 6.1 out of 10 on IMDb with about 200-ish user votes. And there's no Metacritic number for this movie. It stars Kenny Rogers, yes, a musician. He also was in the Gambler movies, and Frederick Lean, I think that's pronounced his last name. He was also in Men in Black. The movie is directed by Dick Lowry, who also did Last Stand at Saber River. The movie on Rotten Tomatoes, the movie doesn't have no critics have reviewed this movie, but the movie does have 70% by audiences with about 700-ish user audiences. The movie isn't available to stream. It's only available to rent and buy on Amazon. Finding a DVD release date was tricky, but I did find one for 2012, but it was kind of hard to find for that one. But yeah, um, so my mom showed me and my sister, this movie. This movie is very interesting. It takes place in the 40s, and it was made for TV movie. It was like one of Kenny Rogers' first movie, because I guess he had like a thing where he was in some movies for a period of time, like TV movies or whatever. And this was based on his song he wrote. And this movie is actually really good. Um, it's shot very well. The acting is very good for a TV movie. It's really good, and the story is interesting. Like the song, basically what it's about. Because I'm gonna basically what it's about. It's about this kid who's raised by his father. His father died in prison because he murdered someone, and he had him promise him on his deathbed never to, commit violence. So he's a pacifist, pretty much. Um, and he was raised by his 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 father's brother, who's a preacher, played by Kenny Rogers. So time goes by. There's bullies in town. They constantly harass him about trying to get a rise out of him. He always doesn't doesn't do anything violent, and then World War II happens, and everyone's getting drafted. The guys are getting drafted in town, and people kind of give him shit for not wanting to go because not everyone knows about it, but yeah, he even through the war he tries to maintain no violence, and he constantly tries to balance because he wants to go, he wants to support his country, but he doesn't want to get violent because he's afraid of becoming like his dad and killing someone, you know. And you might think of that as an extreme, but when you get to the climax of the movie, you kind of I won't give anything away, but yeah. So the things about this movie, even being made in the 70s, it does a good job of replicating the 40s, and I think because since the 40s back then wasn't that far off, so I think the resources for replicating that time period was a bit easier to get than now. Um, this movie has a lot of does a lot of ballsy stuff. Like, first of all, portraying American World War II soldiers as bad guys, like in the 70s, that's pretty aggressive. That you didn't really see that really back then, as far as I know. They usually get portrayed as the heroes. Um, so and two, there's a very and it's in the Symphos. What happens to a girl, something bad. And doing that on TV and for families to see, they did a really good job of border borderlining, like not getting too much for it to like be questionable for TV. They did a good job on that. Now things and the acting's good. Even Kenny Rogers is actually a really good actor. In all honesty, he could have done more in acting if he wanted to. The things that don't work. The biggest thing in this movie that doesn't work is some of the dialogue. Not all of it, but some of the dialogue is a little weird. It's not it's not the fault of the actors. It's hard dialogue to really say because there's some things. The main character, the writing itself, not just dialogue, but some of the writing's a little curveballish. The main character, like when he gets like down, he does a questionable thing or two. It makes you like, wow, you kind of did something pretty bad there. I mean, if you think about it, it's not really that bad. He didn't technically break any rules doing what he did, but it kind of makes you wonder, like, wow, you definitely have some demons. No wonder. No wonder your dad asked you not to commit violence. And the big thing in the plot, like in the Symphos, like the Symphos, what happens in the Symphos doesn't really happen till much later in the movie. So you're kind of there's a lot of build up, but it's good build up because you get to explore this world a little bit. You get to see what he's going through. You get to relate to him. And but towards the end of the movie, he starts to get a little. And then some of the the end dialogue when him and his girl were talking about what happened. Some of the not all the dialogue, but a line or two out of like a group of lines, like 30 or 40, just come across as dated. You could tell that they didn't quite know how to write dialogue for that kind of for talking about a situation that happened. You can tell that they didn't quite know how to write it. But you got to keep in mind that TV shows weren't talking about that kind of stuff back then. So it was kind of so they had so they were kind of trying to figure out how to say it right. And they did a good job for the most part. It just needed it just a, two or three lines needed a little reworking. And there are a few of those throughout the movie, but it never detracts from the movie in my opinion. And the climax fight, that was a great fight. It was an awesome scene. It definitely was worth watching. Yeah, it's a great movie. I think the only fault of it is that it needed the dialogue writer should there should have been someone should have gone through in the dialogue and should be like, okay, let's cut this line out, let's retweak this, and then you're good. That's really the biggest thing. Maybe a couple story elements, one or two story elements, I think I would have changed if I were me, but they don't really affect the character. It just kind of gives him more of a gray area in hindsight. And again, back then, people maybe thought a little differently than we do now. Maybe the actions they thought were kind of fine back then or could work back then don't quite work now. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're going to check this out. This movie is going to be hard to find. If you don't have, you're going to have to rent it or buy it on Amazon. That's really the only way to get it online. Otherwise, you got to buy the DVD, and I don't even know where to find the DVD. But I do recommend this movie. It's very good. And if you do watch and you do like Kenny Rogers, because even though it's a Kenny Rogers vehicle, he's technically not the main guy. It's the other actor. So if you want more Kenny Rogers, he does a lot of the Gambler movies, and I think the same guy who directed those movies. So if you like this movie and Kenny Rogers, then you're probably gonna like those movies. I haven't seen them, but if they're anything like this, then I'm gonna assume they're pretty solid. But yeah, this is a great example of a TV movie from back then that tries being a little bit more ballsy in certain topics and areas. And yeah, and it does bring up some moral questions as well, like when to act in violence, when is it right, when is it wrong? It's definitely something that brings up. Again, the only like I said, the only real thing about it is some of the dialogue could have used a little tweaking. It doesn't hurt the movie. It's not a majority of dialogue. It's a little bit of it, kind of enough to be noticeable, and that's a point that ruins the movie. And maybe a little bit of the story, like a couple actions I would have liked to tweak a little bit. I will say a lot of the weird dialogue stuff, a decent amount actually happens more towards the end of the movie. Like I don't towards the end of the movie for some reason. Like, it's not as noticeable in the early parts of the movie, but towards the end. And most of the weird dialogue is mostly centered around the main character. Like, you can tell they were trying to write him kind of com- the best way to describe this movie is prototype complexity. Like, you can tell they wanted to be a complex movie, but it was made in the early 70s, based in the 40s. They were kind of trying to figure out, because a lot of those movies weren't really made except for like big budget, like edgy indie movies, and they didn't want to be that, but at the same time they didn't just want to copy and paste from everyone else either. So they were kind of trying, you could tell they were trying to do something here, and it works well for the most part. It just, you could tell that there was a couple growing pains there that they probably could have reworked. And again, it could have just been the product of the time period too. Like, that could take effect as well. So, but yeah, I liked it. I recommend it. I think if you move for something a bit more old school, something that might underrated, something that might surprise you, this is a good movie for that. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the videos, and have a good day.